Let's break down what we're going to be working on. This is the card we're going to be designing. It's a real estate card. Let's break it down further. We'll have three sections: the header containing the background, we have the content section, and we have a footer section with our price and call to action. Let's break it down one extra layer. We have a parent div to contain the card. Inside the card wrapper div, we're going to have a header div, a content div, and a footer div, which will be broken down into more childs. Hey there everyone, let's make the card that we just showed. Now before we get started, one thing to mention is this is kind of a little more advanced tutorial in the sense that I'm not going to be teaching Tailwind CSS. I am going to expect or assume that most of you watching this will know it, and even if you don't and know CSS, you should be able to follow along just fine. I will have all the resources in the description. You can just go inside Tailwind CSS and you should be able to see all the information there. But without further ado, let's get started. We're going to start with the main div. Now in the main div, we're going to add in H screen, so that's going to encompass into the full screen. Go with the full width, and after that let's do a gradient color, gradient to TL. That's one of the properties that Tailwind CSS lets you apply. Once you set that, you can set up two colors. The first being the from color, where we can gonna set indigo 500. As you can see, it's changing. And two, we're gonna do blue 500. Perfect. That should be it for the main div. Let's go back to the div inside. This is gonna be a wrapper div for the card. For this example, let's give it a class of W80. That's a specific width size. That should translate to about 20 rem or 320 pixels. We're not going to set a height as we want it to dynamically adjust. Let's give it a background of white, a roundedness of medium, and a shadow of 2XL. Perfect. Inside this card wrapper, we're going to have a div for the header, a div for the content, and a div for the footer. Let's put a little bit of data in here. As you can see, it's on the top left, and we don't want that. So we're gonna adjust this to have a flex box, justify center, and items center. Perfect. Let's go back to our actual header. Now this div is pretty much for adding in the background image. So we're gonna give it a specific height here. So let's set up a class. We're gonna give it a height of about 24. Actually, a lot more than that. Let's do a height of 60. I think that seems about good. Now let's do a background, and we're gonna use this brackets to add in an arbitrary value, as Tailwind calls it, where we can pass in specific value. Usually you would actually assign the values in your background images inside the config file for Tailwind CSS, as long as you know what they are, but sometimes you don't. So something like this URL will come back. Let's copy that, and that would go in over here. We're going to use the URL and paste that in. See, as you can see, it is being rendered right now, but we want it to be covered inside the height and within the div. Basically right now it's kind of spreading out, so we do bg cover. Perfect. And we want it to be centered, so bg center. We didn't make any big changes, but if the image is big enough, it should center itself in the middle, and that should be good for now. One thing you might have noticed is the corners are sharp again, and we'll fix that later. Let's start with the content. Let's see. For the content, we're also going to give it a BG of white, and let's give it a padding of 4. So there's some kind of padding going on for now. We're going to have two divs here. The first div is going to contain the pills that we have. So there's going to be divs for the pill. Now let's do a p tag that says something like new hours ago, something to that effect. Let's give this text some styling. So we do style. We're gonna give it background of green from 100. Oops, this should be class. So background green 100. We're gonna give it a text of green 600. So it's strong, and right there we're gonna make it rounded full, and that should be about, oh actually we need to give it a px of 4. So that's horizontal padding. Now the text itself is a little too large, so let's change that to be something like small. Now small itself is not as small as I would like it to be, so we're going to use the arbitrary value system to give it 10 pixels. And let's make the font bold. Actually make it medium. Perfect. Now as you can see, the pill itself is expanding out the full container. Actually, let's update the y value to be only 2, because that was a little too much. Now to fix this, we need to do is go to the div and give it a class of flex, and that should fix it. Fantastic. Now let's duplicate this for the secondary line. We're gonna name it something like video tour, and let's give it a different color. Let's make this violet. Perfect. As you can see, there is no gap here. Well, we want a gap, so we're gonna go back to our flex, and we're just gonna gap 2, so that gives some kind of gap there. Let's move on to the next div, which would be over here. This is going to be for the actual informational content. So even under here, we're going to start with a p tag. This is going to have the name of the house, something like vacation home. It could be whatever, it doesn't need to be. Let's give it a class, a text of XL, so it's large, font bold, give it a text color of gray 900. Perfect. Duplicate that down. Let's give it the property details, so something like 2 bed, 2 bath, and the square feet, so 2113 square feet. Now this is obviously not what we want, so let's fix that. Let's switch this bold. Let's remove this bold completely and change the gray to something like 700. Oops, and actually change this XL to SM as well, and that should fix it. Perfect. And now let's add another one, another p tag that would be the address. So something like 123 something street at 44321, whatever it is. Let's also give it a class. We're gonna give it text SM, so keep same, but make the color even lighter for better hierarchy. So great. Now we would like a little gap over here between the pills and the content. So for this, which is over here, this has got that, this got this BG, let's give it a flex. So you know, it goes next to each other for flex. Let's give it a flex call so they stack on top of each other, and now give it a gap of 2. Perfect. There's a little spacing now going on. And that covers our content. Now let's do our footer, which is over here. For the footer, we would need text, a div that contains our pricing tag. So this div is going to have our p tag for $2.99, and we can have another p tag that says per month. For the first p tag, let's style it as similar to our vacation home title. So Excel, give it font bold and text gray 900. Perfect. And for the /month, let's do text XS, so it's small, and text gray 500, so it's lighter in color. Now let's put a class flex for their parent, so they they sit next to each other. So let's put a flex and items center. Fantastic. That's all we want. And that is gonna take care of our pricing. Now underneath, let's add a button. This is gonna have our call to action. Look now. Oops. So for this button, let's style it first, and then we're gonna adjust the positioning. For class, we're gonna have a BG of blue 600, a text of white. We're gonna have a horizontal padding 4 and a vertical padding of 2, and let's give it a small roundedness of medium and a tiny shadow. Perfect. Now let's go to the parent div, which is over here. I'm gonna give it a class of flex and justify between, so it goes to the edges. Now here, let's give it a background of gray 50, so there's a little more of distinction between the content and the buttons. And let's do a border T that would set up a top border T gray 100, so better distinction. And now let's give it a padding of 4. That's maybe a little too much, so let's do 2. That's perfect. Now, seems like we're at a great position to stop, but one thing you still have noticed is all the edges are sharp, which we don't want. Now, we could go inside each of the contents and give it border radiuses, so that would fix it. But another thing we can do is just target the main parent, the card wrapper, and do overflow hidden, and that would also adjust the roundedness, because everything that's overflowing, that's just gonna hide it. And that's really it. That's how you design this card. Let's see how different they are. There's a little bit of padding on the side. I'm not sure if I'm missing that. I wonder if it was 4 actually. The 4 seems too much. 2. Let's do PX4 and PY2. Maybe? Let's do PY2. P2 for now. But that's the gist of it. And that should do it. Thanks for watching. And if you liked it, please let me know anything else I would like to make. Maybe React tutorials. I'd love to do that. Thank you.